My son-in-law called me Gerald at my own daughter's wedding rehearsal dinner. Not Dad. Not even Mr. Whitfield. Just Gerald, loud enough for the whole table to hear. Like he was talking to a colleague he barely respected. My daughter caught my eye from across the table and looked away. That was 3 years ago. I should have seen it then. My name is Gerald Whitfield. I'm 67 years old. Retired from 28 years with the city of Ottawa as a civil engineer. My wife, Carol, passed from ovarian cancer 6 years ago. And after that, it was just me and our daughter, Megan, and whatever life we could build around the hole she left behind. Carol was the one who kept the warmth in our family. She was the one who knew how to say the right thing, how to smooth things over, how to make everyone feel like they belonged. When she died, I did my best. I'm not sure it was ever good enough. Megan met her husband, Derek, about 4 years ago. He was charming when he wanted to be good-looking, confident, the kind of man who shook your hand firmly and looked you in the eye. I wanted to like him. I tried hard to like him. And for a while, I told myself that I did. They got engaged after 8 months and married the following summer. The wedding was at a venue outside of Canada. I paid for most of it, just over $38,000, because Megan asked me to and because Carol would have wanted her daughter to have a beautiful day. Derek's parents contributed a small amount, maybe $4,000. Derek himself was between jobs at the time. He'd left a position at a tech startup in Gatineau, said the company was going in the wrong direction, said he had plans. He always had plans. Within a year of the wedding, they came to me. They had found a house in Barrhaven, a nice 3-bedroom, semi-detached, good neighborhood. Good schools for the children they were already talking about. The problem was the down payment. They had $20,000 saved between them. The house was listed at just under $500,000 with CMHC mortgage insurance. They needed at least 5% down. But to avoid the higher insurance premiums and get a reasonable rate, they needed more. They asked if I could help bridge the gap. I gave them $45,000. I want to be clear about something. I gave it, not loaned. I didn't draw up papers, didn't charge interest, didn't ask for a repayment schedule. Carol and I had always intended to help Megan when the time came. And this was the time. I sat at my kitchen table in my house in Nepean and I transferred $45,000 from my RRSP savings money I had been setting aside for decades into their joint account. Derek shook my hand. Megan hugged me. I drove home and made myself a cup of tea and sat by the window and thought about Carol and how she would have smiled. Derek eventually found work, a project manager role at a mid-sized construction firm in Ottawa. The salary was reasonable, somewhere around $70,000 a year. Megan was working part-time at a dental office in Barrhaven, maybe 2 or 3 days a week. Between the two of them, they should have been comfortable. The mortgage payments were manageable. They had no student debt to speak of. And the house had already appreciated slightly since they bought it. But comfortable was never quite the word they used. About 8 months after they moved in, Megan called me on a Tuesday evening. They were having trouble with the car payment. Derek's Jeep, a Grand Cherokee, he had leased before they were married, had come up for renewal. And the new payment was higher than expected. Could I help out just for a couple of months while they sorted out their budget? I said yes. The couple of months turned into a standing arrangement. $420 a month. Coming out of my account, like clockwork. Then it was the home insurance. They'd chosen a policy that turned out to be more expensive than they'd budgeted for. Could I cover the annual premium while they reorganized things? I covered it. Then there were the property taxes. Ottawa property taxes on a Barrhaven home were not cheap, and their first installment had caught them off guard. I helped with that too. I wasn't keeping a running total at the time. I wish I had been. Looking back, In the 2 years following that initial down payment, I contributed somewhere between $14,000 and $18,000 in various forms of additional support: car payments, insurance, a new furnace when the old one failed in February, a few grocery runs when Megan mentioned things were tight. I wasn't doing it to keep score. I was doing it because she was my daughter, and I loved her, and because I was retired with a reasonable pension and some savings, and it seemed like the right thing to do. What I didn't fully account for was Derek. Derek had opinions, strong ones, delivered with the casual confidence of a man who had never been wrong, at least not in his own estimation. He had opinions about how I parked in their driveway, about the gifts I brought when I visited, about how long I stayed. He once told Megan, within my hearing, that I had a habit of making myself too comfortable in their space. I was sitting in the living room at the time, in the chair by the window, drinking the coffee Megan had made me. I had been there for perhaps 90 minutes. I started calling ahead before visits. Then I started waiting to be invited. The invitations became less frequent. Megan was caught in the middle, and I could see it wearing on her. She loved Derek. I believe that genuinely. She also loved me. But Derek had a way of framing things that made my presence feel like an imposition. And over time, I watched my daughter start to adopt that framing. She began apologizing for things that didn't require apologies, for inviting me to things, for calling me too often, for putting Derek in an awkward position. I didn't know what position that was. Exactly. I was her father. I had given them the foundation for the life they were living. What position was that? Awkward or otherwise? Last December, their son turned 2. My grandson, Oliver. He has Carol's eyes, that same particular shade of gray-green that I used to call sea glass. I had been looking forward to his birthday party for weeks. I had bought him a wooden train set from a shop on Bank Street. The kind that could be expanded over years. The kind I had wanted when I was a boy, and could never afford. I wrapped it myself. I wrote a card 2 days before the party. Megan called me. She sounded tired. She said Derek felt that the party should be immediate family and close friends, only meaning his parents, who were flying in from Kelowna, and a handful of Derek's friends and their children. She said there wasn't really space for a big gathering. I asked if I was being uninvited from my grandson's 2nd birthday. There was a pause. She said it wasn't like that. I asked what it was like. Then, she said she was sorry. She had to go. She would call me later. She didn't call me later. I spent that Saturday, the day of Oliver's birthday, in my house in Nepean. I made myself dinner. I watched something on television that I don't remember. At 9 o'clock in the evening, I took the wrapped train set down from the shelf where I had put it, and I sat with it on my lap for a while. And I thought about Carol, the way I always do when something hurts and there's no one to tell. A week later, Megan came by alone. She seemed relieved, the way people do when they've rehearsed something. She said Derek had just been feeling overwhelmed with the holidays, that it wasn't personal, that we should plan something soon, just the 3 of us. Once things calmed down, I nodded. I made her tea. I gave her the train set to take home to Oliver. She hugged me at the door and I watched her drive away. Things did not calm down. By February, the dynamic had shifted into something I no longer had the vocabulary to ignore. Derek had stopped acknowledging me at family gatherings entirely. Not rudely, he was too careful for that, but with a kind of practiced invisibility, a way of orienting the conversation, so that I was always slightly outside of it. When I spoke, he would respond to Megan. When I asked him a direct question, he would give a short answer and turn away. It was the social equivalent of a closed door. And it was working. I was spending less and less time with my daughter and my grandson because every time I was around, I came home feeling smaller than when I left. Then came Easter. Megan had mentioned, casually, in late March, that they were doing Easter dinner. She said it in that way that implies an invitation without actually extending one. The way you talk about plans to someone you assume is included. I assumed I was included. I told her I would bring a ham, the way Carol always used to. She said that sounded lovely, on Good Friday, 2 days before Easter Sunday. I received a text from Megan. Derek's parents were coming after all. They had changed their flights. They were arriving Saturday and leaving Monday. The house was going to be full. She was so sorry. She knew this was last minute. But would I mind if we rescheduled? I sat with that text for a long time. I thought about the $45,000 I had given them for a down payment on the house that was apparently too full to fit me. I thought about the car payments and the furnace and the insurance premiums and the birthday party I had spent alone. I thought about Carol. I thought about who I had become in the years since she died, whether I had become someone smaller, someone who could be rescheduled, someone who sat alone with a wrapped gift and told himself it was fine. I typed back, no problem at all. Enjoy your weekend. Then I put my phone down and I opened my laptop. I went through my bank records methodically, the way an engineer reviews a report carefully, without emotion, looking for the shape of things. Over the course of 2.5 years, I had contributed, in total, just over $61,000 to Megan and Derek's household. The down payment, the car payments, the insurance, the furnace, the property tax installments, the groceries, the miscellaneous transfers when things were tight, $61,000. That was more than a year of my pension income. That was money from Carol's life insurance settlement. That was my retirement. I did not make any decisions that night. I am not a man who makes decisions quickly. Carol used to say, I was the most deliberate person she had ever met. That I could think about something so long it aged it. She meant it affectionately. I thought about it for 3 weeks. During those 3 weeks, I watched what happened. Megan texted occasionally cheerful, surface-level messages. The kind you send when you're managing a relationship rather than living inside it. A photo of Oliver with an Easter basket. A message saying they should get together soon. Nothing concrete. Derek sent nothing, as he never did. In late April, Megan called to ask if I could help with the summer car insurance renewal. The Jeep lease had converted to a financing arrangement, and the insurance was coming up. The number she mentioned was $1,100. I said I would think about it and let her know. I spent a week after that call, doing 2 things. The first was talking to a financial advisor I trusted, a woman named Patricia, who had managed some of my accounts since before Carol died. I laid out the numbers for her. She listened without expression, and when I finished, she said, quietly, Gerald, this is not a financial problem. I knew she was right. The second thing I did was write 2 letters. Not to send, just to write. One was to Megan. The other was to myself. Which sounds strange. But Carol had taught me to do that. She said you couldn't know what you really thought about something until you wrote it down for an audience of 1. I wrote down everything. The birthday party. Easter. The text that said no problem at all when the problem was considerable. The feeling of being rescheduled. The feeling of being less than welcome in the life I had helped to build. On the 1st of May, I called Megan and asked if she was free to meet for coffee. We sat at a Tim Hortons near her house. Her suggestion, which I noted, because it meant she wasn't inviting me in. She was warm. Asked how I was. Talked about Oliver for a while. He'd learned a new word. He was obsessed with buses. I smiled and listened and waited. Then I told her, I told her calmly, the way I do everything, without drama or accusation. I told her that I had been reviewing my finances and that I needed to make some changes. That going forward, I would not be in a position to contribute to household expenses, not the car insurance, not the property taxes, not any of the regular transfers. I told her that I loved her, and that I loved Oliver, and that nothing about that was changing. But I also told her that I had felt, over the past year especially, that my presence in her family had become conditional, that I was welcome when it was convenient, and set aside when it was not, and that I had been absorbing that quietly for long enough that it had started to cost me something I couldn't get back. She stared at me. I told her I wasn't angry. That was true. I had moved through angry and arrived somewhere quieter. I told her that I had also decided to redirect the money I had been contributing each month, the car payments, the insurance, all of it, into a registered education savings plan for Oliver, that the money wasn't disappearing. It was just going somewhere that couldn't be managed or redirected by anyone other than Oliver himself. When he was old enough, I had already set it up. Patricia had helped me. Megan said, "Dad, this is..." And then she stopped. I waited. She said Derek was going to be upset. I said I understood that. She said things had just been really stressful. That Derek's job had been difficult. That she hadn't meant to make me feel. I put my hand on the table between us. Not to stop her. Just to let her know I was still there. I said, "Megan, I know, and I'm not leaving. I'm just done being invisible." She cried a little. I handed her a napkin. We sat there for another half hour, drinking bad coffee. And somewhere in that half hour, something shifted. Some old tension I hadn't even fully named began to loosen. Just slightly. Like the first sign of a thaw. That evening, my phone rang 4 times in a row. Derek. I let it go to voicemail. He left one message, short and controlled, saying he thought we should talk. I texted back the following morning, happy to talk. Derek, I'm free Thursday afternoon. He did not respond to that text. He called twice more. I did not answer. On Thursday, he called again. I picked up. The conversation lasted 11 minutes. I know because I looked at my phone afterward. He said he felt blindsided. He said I was causing stress in his household. He said that pulling financial support out of nowhere was manipulative. I let him finish. Then I said, simply, that I hadn't pulled anything out of nowhere, that I had given Megan 3 weeks of notice, had had a direct conversation with her, and that the money had not vanished but had been redirected toward our grandson's future. I said I was sorry. He felt blindsided. I said I hoped we could find a way to move forward respectfully. He said, "What does that even mean?" I said. "It means I'd like to be invited to Oliver's 3rd birthday." There was a silence. I said, "That's all?" "Derek, that's actually all." He hung up. 3 days later, Megan came to my house, alone. She sat at my kitchen table in the same chair her mother used to sit in. And she talked for a long time. About Derek, about the pressure he was under, about how she had let the distance between us grow without really understanding why, or without letting herself understand why. She said some things that were hard to hear, and I said some things that were hard to say. And at the end of it, she asked if she could stay for dinner. I made pasta. It was nothing special, the same thing I make when I don't know what else to make. We ate at the kitchen table, and she told me stories about Oliver, and I told her about the resp I had set up, how it worked, what it could become. She asked if she could bring him by on the weekend. He came on Saturday. He walked through my front door, pointed at everything in sight, and said "bus" about 6 different objects. none of which were buses. I got down on the floor with him and we built things out of blocks and knocked them over and built them again. It was, I think, the best Saturday I'd had in a long time. The financial support I had been providing did not resume. I was careful about that, not out of spite, but because I understood, finally, what Patricia had meant when she said it wasn't a financial problem. The money had been filling a gap that money couldn't actually fill. Stopping it didn't fix that gap, but it did force the question into the open where it could be dealt with honestly, which was the only way I knew how to deal with anything. Derek and I are not close. I don't expect that we will be, but there is a civility between us now that didn't exist before. And it is a civility based on clarity, rather than on my willingness to absorb discomfort without naming it. He knows where I stand. I know where he stands. Megan stands somewhere in between, doing her best, which is all any of us can do. Oliver starts junior kindergarten in the fall. The RESP is growing. When he is 18 and ready for whatever comes next, university, college, a trade, a gap year, something Carol and I could never have imagined, there will be money there with his name on it. That's not nothing. In fact, I think it might be everything. I read something once, I don't remember where, that said, the quietest form of dignity is simply refusing to disappear. I'm 67 years old. I retired from a long career. I lost the person I loved most in the world. I helped build a life for my daughter and asked very little in return. I am done disappearing. If there is any lesson in any of this, and I'm not sure I'm the right person to be handing out lessons, it's this: the people who love you will make room for you. Not perfectly, not always, not without difficulty, but they will make room, and the ones who don't, well, eventually, the receipts come due.